Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, here we are. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Over 100 hours clocked on my in-game file. Played it since launch, so it's been a number of months. But I'm finally at the end of this.
Ever.
Well, is it a bloater? That's what people are really interested in hearing. We will get to all that eventually, but it was a long one to get through, and we're here in Idle Game Chat to talk through it. Well, I'm going to talk through it. You're going to hopefully ask the questions that everyone wants to know. Again, as I say, the responsibility is on you to get this right.
The problem with Final Fantasy is that the names of Final Fantasies and the numbers of them are a complete blur for me. And you talk about these things as well to me when you talk to me about your backlogs and stuff. And I have lost track of whether it's a remake. But basically, just to give you a heads up, I don't know where the fuck we are with this anymore.
Well, I think after finishing this, I'm not sure I know where the fuck we are either, but we'll get into that.
Well, this is...
I knew where we started.
So from my perspective, what completely is throwing me is the fact that there's these new, as far as I understand, they're doing new ones, right? So we're like Final Fantasy 17 or something, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever it is. I don't know where we're up to, but we're 16. In the teens.
Yeah, we'll be on 17 next time.
Right?
Yeah.
And then...
Correct.
You seem to have these entries that are filling gaps in between earlier games. And then you've got remakes, I think, lurking as well.
Yeah.
So you've got these three different things that are lurking, and I don't know which ones are which anymore. Obviously, the next big number will be the latest installment.
Yeah. So 15, 16, 17, for example, that's what's known as like the mainline series. They're the new entries in the franchise. They're not linked. They're all separate entries. Now, why they insist on using this... Of course, yeah, because it means you can dive into any of them.
Yes.
They share like similar things. They always share the same currency, gil, for example, and the summons that you might call in are usually the same. But the setting, the world, the universe, the characters, usually all different. There's a couple of characters that seem to appear in all of them, like under different pseudonyms or different names or different... Like you might have this guy called... I think Sid might even be one of them, and he's in some of the other ones, but it's not the Sid. It's just they reuse the name and sort of nod and a wink type thing. It's more of an Easter egg.
You know what I liken it to in my head to try and get around it is the Marvel Universe.
Well, no. Because that requires so much knowledge and backstory for it to... I think we've got to the stage where actually it doesn't. But at one point, you weren't watching that Endgame without watching Infinity Wars, without watching Civil War, without what... And it was that was the point of it, wasn't it? The cinematic universe. Yeah.
Avengers ties it all together, but you've got all these different entries. The reason why in my simple head I have to do this is because I think when we've spoken about it before, there's nods, I think, to other games in certain ways. And I think that's what the Marvel Universe did, is that you're watching Spider-Man, but there'll be this nod or a random appearance from like a Doctor Strange in it, and you go, well, what's he doing it? And they did it a bit more in the later ones, but in the early stages, there were just some tiny little nods to it, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously, as the whole thing just snowballed, it became more obvious and more in your face about it. But I think at the original stages, they were just sort of trickling a few elements of it out there. And I don't know whether that's the opposite of what's happened to Final Fantasy, which was that they were linked and then they've decoupled it more over the series.
They are less linked than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as in the nods that are there are just nods. There's very, very little, if any lore reasons for 16 to be related to 15. Like there's nothing really like that as far as I'm concerned. Whereas Marvel, the same characters appear. Like you said, Doctor Strange might pop up, but he will have his own Doctor Strange game, and he'll also be film, and then he'll also probably have a fucking TV show next. Has he got one? No,
I
good.
fucking hope.
Well,
Honestly, I hope not. I don't want any more.
No,
I'm
that's
done with superheroes.
Yeah.
Saying that, I'm watching The Boys at the minute, so I say I'm done with it, and I've got that going on.
fresh. But yeah, there's no. It's not even like that really. There's let's say there's winks and there's nods, but there's not characters and that really carry over at all, if anything. So
what you're saying is the assumption I've made is wrong.
well, essentially, if you could go into Final Fantasy 17 if you wanted to, and not be concerned about 15, 16, 12, 13, 7. Like it really does not matter. It's like a completely new entry, new story, new setting, new weapons, new theme. Usually, there's usually a theme that's related to it. So, but I'm not surprised people are confused by this, because for the longest time, people that are uninitiated will think, well, what 17 or 16? Oh, fuck, I'm not playing those. Or don't. How could I ever catch up? And the answer is you can't, and you don't need to. Is the real answer. But it's a bit of a marketing blunder, as far as I'm concerned. When you chuck numbers on the end of things, I'm like, well, you're assuming that people come along and A, don't care, which was probably the case for most normal people, but B, understand that actually you don't need to have known. It's a why use a number, why not use a subtitle. That's my favourite way of franchises kind of existing if it's not a direct sequel. This ain't Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, you don't need all that. There's no real. You don't really get much payoff if you've played the others anyway. As I said, there's a tiny, like minuscule bit, but generally, it's play 17.
What about Grand Theft Auto? Because they do that and they don't really need to.
No,
I don't know why it's and there's loads of games that seem to do this.
FIFA 24, EA Sports Football 24. It's the 24th entry into the football, the lore. What was his name? Hunter. That journey fuck.
Oh God, I can't remember.
Got Adam Hunter made, but I don't think it is that.
I don't know.
Alex?
Alex. It is, yeah. It's Alex Hunter. That is unbelievable you've remembered that.
I don't know if that's accurate. I'm going to have to check it now.
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm 99% sure that's his name.
That's dead anyway, isn't it? Because it's now EA Sports.
Well, yeah.
It is Alex Hunter.
Yeah. As soon as you said Alex, I was like, because that Hunter on its own didn't sound right, but
No.
Alex Hunter did trip the memory. What was that? That must have been like FIFA 20.
No, I've got FIFA 17 here. Yeah, FIFA 17, The Journey.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
I knew it was around that sort of time. So you remembered 7-8 years ago into that series. Quite unbelievable.
Did play that one, so I played through the story.
It was all right for it was, to be fair. It was all right. I'm trying to think of games now. I mean, Call of Duty stopped numbering, but numbering is.
You got Modern Warfare 3 lurking.
What's the third Modern Warfare?
Black Ops 3, they're still numbering it.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it started COD 4, COD 5, and then after that they went
Yeah.
And now I think after that it might have been the first Black Ops. No, there's Modern Warfare 2. And Black Ops. Anyway, we're getting off piste. Basically,
you don't
do
need
we
to be
need to
playing
go up
them.
to 16, 17?
No. But the trouble with Rebirth is, let me read this. It's off the store page.
Yeah, let's get to that, shall we?
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the second entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, which retells the story of the genre-defining RPG across 3 distinct games. Iconic heroes Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Aerith and Red XIII have escaped the dystopian city Midgar and are now in pursuit of Sephiroth, the vengeful swordsman from Cloud's past, who is thought to be dead. This new adventure can be enjoyed by all players, even those who have yet to play Final Fantasy VII Remake or the PlayStation original. Expect a new standard of cinematic storytelling, fast-paced combat and rich exploration across a vast world. Now, what I will say about that final bit, even those who have yet to play Final Fantasy VII Remake or the PlayStation original, I would let them off on the PlayStation original to a certain extent. I think you can get away with that. But to sit there and brazenly say, you don't have to have played Remake is just complete nonsense. Like, you absolutely do. You want to. Now, what it does do, I must say, to sort of dig themselves out of a small hole, they've dug themselves out of their arrogant marketing, is there is the story so far. You go in the main menu, you hit the video, and it's 5-10 minutes. It recaps it. So, I mean, what they should put in there is say, as long as you watch the story so far in the game, then you'll understand. Because if you just went into this completely, fresh. You'd be like, what is all this? And the impact of a lot of the games lost. That's why knowing what happens and being familiar with the original is also quite important, because this is a remake project as they've keyed it, but they are fucking about with things, and there's winks and nods, and there's layers of understanding that only the true fans can really get to the bottom of. But minimum, you want to have played that remake one. That's just a complete lie. And the thing about Final Fantasy VII, this is how I've come to understand it. So ignore what I said about 15, 16, they are separate. 7 isn't even really just a game. Final Fantasy VII is like its own series. There is a compendium of... There's a CG movie, there's a mobile game, there's several entries. We've done Crisis Core a few weeks or / months ago. I can't remember when we did it. There's now this remake project. There's the original. So Final Fantasy VII kind of made its own little series, and they've spun that off. They even done, I think they've done a fucking, what's the name? Battle Royale mode, First Soldier or something. That had characters and little bits of lore tied to it. So Final Fantasy VII in itself, it was a game, but it's now become a series in its own. It's all these different games that and properties. Like I said, there's a fucking CGI film in there knocking about Advent Children, and it's all spinning off of Final Fantasy VII. So the more you know about that and all the past stuff and that media, the better you're going to be off. But the minimum, I would say, you have to have played 7 Remake. Ideally, you're familiar with the beats of the original as well, just so you can understand some of the perhaps the more deeper stuff that they're angling at. But yeah, it's a bit of a it's grown tentacles, this 7, and none of the others really do that. There's like a 13, I think it's a 13 part 2, but usually it's a single entry, perhaps some DLC, and then on your bike we're going to forget about these people, these characters, this story, and set up a fresh new world for you to explore next time. But that's where we are now in terms of the store page. Lying again.
Is this whole fascination with the 7th entry because it was like a turning point in the series, or it's like a key entry or a fan favorite, or is that why it gets so much attention compared to all the others?
You ask many people that grew up and played it in the 90s. This was maybe their game of the 90s. And 7, for whatever reason, was the turning point. 6, I've not played, but I've heard is very, very good also. But something about 7 drew people in. It ended up being a PlayStation exclusive, which probably gave it a bit of extra juice. They were formerly always on Nintendo platforms, made a jump across. You had the polygon graphics, which look crude today, but back in the day were kind of like, wow, that's pretty...
Cutting edge.
That's it was cutting edge. And you had the CG... movies as well that were or cutscenes that were popped into that. So yeah, I mean, it's the one. If you're going to pick one of them to say which Final Fantasy is the most important or the most well known, 7 is unquestionably that. Whether it's the best one, that's always going to be up for debate. People are never going to agree with that.
Recency bias. And all
there
that
is
stuff.
always. I mean, I've got that really. My main experience of Final Fantasy is 15 and 16 and 7 Remake and now 7 Rebirth. Really, the old ones are barely touched. You sort of scrap along as a kid, have a go on it, and think, I don't even know what I'm doing here. What's this turn-based nonsense? And then turn it off.
That would still be my approach.
Told the story about Biff, didn't I? On the edit on the PlayStation, Final Fantasy VII. It was on 3 discs. That's how big it was.
Forgot they used to do this.
And he got onto the 2nd or 3rd disc, and it wouldn't read. It was scratched, so he never got to finish it. A tragic tale.
And that's where it all started, from the trend of not finishing games and cutting them off.
Can't blame when you go for that sort of trauma. Can't possibly finish it because the physical disc broke. That is
about problems like that. Like as kids, it used to really have to take care of those discs because there was obviously literally nothing that was stored on the console beyond a save file.
No, it's it.
And
scratch that or
scratch that, and that's it. Yeah.
I mean, those dirty bastard games used to offer like a warranty service where you could take it in once a year and get your discs clean. They'd pop it. I don't know if that thing ever cleaned it, but because you'd actually get games, you'd play a bit of it. There'd be a certain part of it that would like jump or bug out and completely, like sometimes freeze, and you're like, and you could never get past it. It's because something on the disc was corrupted or broken. So they were the old days, the analog days. Had to live through that for a little bit until we got to this digital age. Now everything's
still not happy with it. Wow. Yeah, that cloud causing problems
frying brains in it, or was that 5G? I can't remember which one it was.
5G that fries the brains, allegedly. Just so we don't get a red flag or something.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Well,
this.
I don't think it's going to make any difference. No one's watching it anyway. So they can try and shadow ban.
They can flag it. Yeah, shadow ban. Yeah, what D-list? Is it D-list? I can't remember.
They do something where it doesn't turn up in the search ever. That's on Twitter as well. There's certain accounts that were apparently shadow banned where you'd search for them, they wouldn't come up.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell's going on? Anyway.
That was back in the day of... I've forgotten his name now.
Musk.
Shit in hell. No, pre-Musk, wasn't it?
Zuckerberg. Oh, matey boy.
Dorsey.
Yeah.
Jack Dorsey and co, yeah. Yeah, we have gone off-piste. So, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yes. Rebirth. So this is part 2 of 3.
Is that basically what we're dealing with here? So we had the remake, which is part 1.
Yep.
Rebirth, which is part 2, and then whatever will come along.
Yeah.
I assume,
something. I think they're going to try and stick to that cadence. Of
Reborn.
Should be Reunion, but they've already used that for Crisis Core.
Well, that was that ridiculous.
Resell. Reskin. Reskin would be great, wouldn't it? Just to really stick it to them.
Final Fantasy Reskin. Final Fantasy Reskin, yeah.
I've got some pillars here that I wrote down.
Some what?
Some what I call pillars. You know, like a not the thing you sleep on, like a beam or pillar, like something that holds something up. You can say, look, this is the core of what makes this game.
Yes, that's useful.
So, first one is combat and party development. So that includes leveling up, essentially. This is what these are the things I think that make up the game. Then we've got story and characters, which I think is an important part of it. Then we've got what I've labelled the world, or the open world even. So the actual locations you visit, etc. Final pillar, there's 4 in this particular game. I think you meant to have 4, but I'm sure you can have a 3-pillared structure.
Well, yeah.
Pyramid. Innit? I mean, it hasn't got any pillars, I don't think. I think they just chuck that in the sand. It's just there. It's big stone, but you could do, couldn't you? Bridges probably only have a couple of pillars on either side, so you could go down to 2. Could have 5, have a central pillar.
No, I really want to be there when they're trying to plan out the pyramids, like thousands of years ago. You just chuck them in the sand, didn't you?
No, aliens did that. We know that. They fucking dropped them on there.
No, so, if you want to really, really waste your life, the best thing to do is go and listen to the Joe Rogan podcast where Graham Hancock debated a guy. It's only a couple of weeks ago.
I think I saw this in the fun. I didn't actually read it. I didn't actually listen to it.
I think it's about 4.5 hours long. And they touched on the pyramids and stuff in that. God, it was a real event. I would class that as a waste of time. Like if there's someone that must have gone and pulled the highlights out of that, because I can't believe Rogan let it go on for that long.
Was it just bickering?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it started off relatively amicable, and then they just started like, and then Graham Hancock just went in on him. Like,
right, got fed up with it,
and he got a bit fed up with it. And I think by the sounds of it, this particular chap, I've forgotten his name. He's not particularly well known or anything like Graham Hancock is, but yeah, he really went in on him. Apparently, he's like anyway, yeah. So that's where you want to go for that.
Well, it was aliens. I'm not disputing. It's not up for debate, is it? Those pyramids, they dropped them down there. And then
he's saying that at least the Sphinx is 13,000 years old, so that's the argument. And then that other fellow was going, "There's no evidence for that." Damn.
I might have to watch something like that just to watch the carnage.
I mean, you have to split it up into sizable chunks, and you have to watch it. This is the other thing. It's a podcast, but they're referencing slides and they're showing slides.
Fucking hell, Jamie's busy.
Yeah, so you have to literally sit there and watch it. It's a slog. So if you thought the Justice League, the Snyder Cut was an event, then strap in for this.
I didn't even bother with that.
No, neither did I. Too long.
Walked away from it. Did I even see the... I think I did see the original. I think the cinema. Yeah, crap. And the final pillar I've put in here, mini-game / odd job / additional turts. This is like the side stuff. So you've got 4 to choose from. Got combat and party development, story and characters, the world or the open world, and then the mini games, odd jobs, and additional turn. And I've got some other bits, like smaller parts that make up the game. Obviously, like we will touch on presentation and performance and all that sort of stuff. But
you start where you want to start. What's the most important thing in a fight? So if you were going to sell this Final Fantasy game to me,
well, I'll say, what do you prefer?
start?
Do you prefer a good story or do you prefer your combat?
You decide.
Well, no, I need to know, because some people can't stand any cutscene in their game, and others have to have a story, otherwise they can't play it.
All right, well, look, I'll throw you a bone. I would probably prefer the combat, wouldn't I? So
Yeah. Well, we'll start there then. So, for those that are not initiated with how Final Fantasy VII combat works, because it is different from 16 in particular, your combat party, and I'll call it that for a reason, and we'll get to that later, consists of 3 people. Cloud's one of them, so that's like the main character, the blonde kid with the big sword. That's the one you'll see on all the trailers. So he's one of them, and then there'll be 2 others. It could be Barret, Red XIII, Aerith, Tifa, or any others that might join you on your adventure throughout.
you select them, or do they give it to you?
Yeah, you select those. So that's the good thing here, is that you can mix and match different party compositions. And the great thing about it is you can... I've completely lost my train of thought there.
Or interrupted him and threw him off his...
No, I don't know where I was going with that. What's that all about?
So you can select your party, and I assume... My question would be, I assume each one have got like different abilities or whatever it is, and you can...
Correct. Some range, some are better to stagger your opponent, some are better at healing, some are better at magic, etc. And the good thing is, good thing is subjective. I like the fact that you can control each of these characters individually as well. So during the combat, you can switch from Cloud to Barret, or from Barret back to Red 13, or whoever you've got in that free. So you can kind of utilize their strengths rather than rely on the AI to do it. The AI by default will not use like their abilities and their special stuff without you triggering it yourself. So that's why you might want to take direct control of them. And generally, you're a bit more efficient, I would say, as a human control player at building things like ATBs, like a meter. Every time you hit the enemy or do a certain action in the game, this little meter will build. When you get a block of that, you can then use that to use a more powerful ability. So the idea, the general loop is build that up, sting them with something strong, reset, build that up, sting them with something strong, use some magic or whatever. Every time you cast a spell, that block goes. So doing certain actions will take away that ATB meter, so you want to keep topping that up using certain actions and whatnot. So that's handy, having access to all those characters. What's quite cool is there's like 5 or 6 of you on this journey throughout the game, and even if people aren't in your combat party, they still run around the world of you. So you're in this big gang basically steaming through the open world, and then when you get into combat, although you can't actively take control of them, they are on the sidelines or in the background, sort of firing their weapons and just doing like chip damage. They'll never save you. Like, it's not, you can't even rely on them, but it's just cool seeing them sort of interacting from afar, like chucking.
They haven't just disappeared into the ether.
Exactly, yeah. They sort of take a
They've
step
gone,
back.
"Oh, Joe, we're going to get a coffee while you deal with
That's
that."
it, yeah. Barret will shoot his machine gun. You hear him shouting and stuff. So I quite like that's there as well. Compared to Remake, they've added some important features. So one of them is that they've expanded just the basic parrying techniques and blocking. Like previously you could block, and I'm not a very good blocker, so this kind of fell on deaf ears to me, but it's very, very powerful if you can get good at it. But you block a lot of attacks. I'm a dodger. I don't like to stand there and get hit and take any damage, but you block and you take, instead of taking 100 damage, you take 1. So that's what you kind of want to do. If you block certain actions at the right time, you can actually parry them and hit them with a powerful counter. So that's a new feature that wasn't really there before. And again, for those that are proper into action games that require parrying and blocking, you're going to be at home here because you've now got that ability to counter. And I've seen people play it. They don't move. They stand there, block, counter, and really do some absolute damage. And again, that sort of action will build that ATB meter quicker. Then you've got synergy moves, which are essentially moves that you and another party member do as like a little team up. And when you're holding block, you've got access to these sort of quick fire ones. So one of them is that Barret will shoot his gun into your sword and you'll sort of bat the bullets over towards the enemy. That'll build specific damage or elemental damage, depending on what's going on. During the battle, once you've kind of done enough ATB and built up your synergy with the party, you can actually unleash powerful moves as well, which don't use your ATB meter. So they're useful to build up and use, and they'll increase stagger. I won't go too deep. What I will say is that the combat is very, very deep, because you couple that base kind of combat that I've described there, attacks and synergies and magic, blocking, parrying, and then you add in I fucking lost train of thought again. This coffee's stinging me. What am I talking about? What's going on?
You're meant to be explaining this this combat to me.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about now. What's this great expansion? I was talking about that and then gone off the boil.
So you explained to me about
waffled.
So essentially, what you're telling me is that there's a really deep way of, and I suppose you can decide how you take these down with the style that suits your style, if that makes sense. I assume that is like the general gist of things.
Yeah. So even if what changes the game really is the materia. So these materia are like orbs that you pick up, and that you basically slot them into your weapons or your armor, and it gives you new abilities or buffs certain abilities or attacks that you've already got. So you get an ability from a material which lets you cast ice damage or ice magic. Sorry. So if you're against an enemy with a weakness to ice, you can use that. And the materia I feel like there's hundreds of these things, all manner of things, all different buffs and debuffs that you can cast on your party and on the opponents. It really, and again, I've not scratched the surface of most of this. Like, it is far deeper than I needed to get to. But people that love experimenting and coming up with new builds and really just destroying higher level enemies will have a lot of fun here in equipping different loadouts for certain fights. So the materia system is great. Just completely, that's what I was going to get to. You've got the base combat, and the materia is like an extra layer on top just to really go balls to the wall and come up with some insane tactics and make your life a little bit easier. And then on top of that, you can upgrade your weapons, you unlock new abilities, you can reskill your abilities for free, so you don't have to worry about making the wrong choice there. There really is a lot here. It's just one of those things that I probably didn't scratch maybe 50% I've left on the table. And you go online and see what people are doing, you're like, Jesus Christ, there's some absolute fiends just who are in tune with how every system works and able to put together these insane loadouts that just cause absolute carnage.
Thing is, though, with a lot of this, and I tend to do this in games, I find something that works.
Yeah,
tend to stick with it, because I'm like, I know this works.
Well, that's also doubly true here, because you'll find certain party members that are just you're better with than others. Like I cannot use Aerith. She's just too slow. Everything's slow about her. Dodge is slow, her movement's slow, but she's extremely powerful if you get her to buff your party. But I could never get into that mindset. I was always using Yuffie, who's ranged and can go in close. She's always a mainstay in my party. Where it catches you out is there are certain points in the game where you will get a set party composition. Like the party might split up and go two ways, and you'll actually play both sides of those sort of journeys they go on. So you might be outcloud. You might be stuck with Aerith and Red 13 and Barret, and that's your loadout. So you have to kind of make sure you're sharp with each of them, at least understand the basics of how to get through it. Otherwise, you'll end up costing yourself. In terms of like leveling up, I think my observation was that you level up slightly faster if you're in the active battle party, in the combat party, but those on the sidelines still get a high percentage of XP, so they'll level up maybe in the 2 battles after. So it's not like they get left behind. In RPGs gone in the past, you will only get XP for those that are taking part in the battle actively, and that's not the case here. So you don't have to worry about forcefully changing people in and out if you don't want to.
So you can be a bit more. You don't feel like you've got to continually rotate it to keep everyone at a level. You can kind of be a bit more relaxed about it.
They'll get dragged along. And I mean, I rotated because I like just to have different feel. Because they all do feel different from one another. That's definitely a plus point. Like, you pick up Red 13, who's like this dog, and he, moves a lot quicker. His dodge is faster. His attacks are faster. And compare him to that slug Barret who's basically got a machine gun in his arm. He ain't going to move, so you need to play with him differently. It's good just to mix things up. And you can't get rid of Cloud. I think once you've completed it, you can take him out and just have free randomers. But during the main game, he will not always be your main because, as I said, your party can get split up. So you'll see perspective where Cloud's not there. But generally, he's always in there plus 2 others.
Interesting, and it's all turn-based. So there's no...
No, there's no turn. No, it's all action.
It's all action, is it?
All action. The only turn-based elements which they will try and claim is like a homage to the old game is when you build that ATB meter, in order to use the abilities, there's 1 or 2 ways you can do it. One, you can assign it to a shortcut, so you can press L1 and square or whatever, and then it'll enact that particular shortcut that but you've only got enough room for about 4 of those. Most people, like me, press X and it will slow the battle down. They still move, but very, very slowly. And then you choose off the menu which of the abilities, the spell, or the item that you want to use. And that's where I think people think, oh, it's kind of like turn-based. It ain't. If you're playing the normal combat mode, which I was, you ain't getting away with just relying on that. Like, you're going to have to get good at the action. There is actually a classic combat mode, which I've not tried. And if I ever do a second playthrough of these 3 games, I might do the whole lot on this, where it essentially auto battles the main sort of combat part. So it blocks, it attacks, it counters, and you're just in charge of doing those abilities, firing off the ATB abilities and the items. I've heard we've got mixed results. It's sometimes really easy, sometimes they're so inefficient that battles take forever. So I don't know what to think about that. Maybe one day, as I said, I'll go back and play through it, but most people will choose the action, and that is real-time input with a hint of command choosing for more powerful abilities. So yeah, don't come in here expecting it's going to be like Persona where you can sit there scratching your ass at what to do. You're going to have to get in there and start attacking and dodging at a minimum, and ideally blocking and countering.
Sounds much better to me. I don't be enjoying that turn-based generally.
No,
absolutely a bit
not.
bland.
They also just a small thing. There's aerial opponents. In Remake, they were a pain in the arse to get because you couldn't get up there and attack them. Now they've added an ability for Cloud where if you dodge and then hold square, he will do a little dodge and then you'll jump up and then you can start air fighting. And that just takes out the frustration of those enemies completely because before it didn't feel fair. Can he get this fuck unless you cast a spell at it? And there's some synergy abilities as well that allow you to launch Tifa up there so she can do that as well. But by default, you've always got Cloud mostly. You can just get him up there to start causing carnage.
Yeah. So, what pillar next? I assume we want to talk about all 4 pillars.
Yeah, we should do. Oh, I have to mention this.
Yeah.
Lots of great bosses. Tons, in fact. They do have mid-boss checkpoints. So if there's a number of phases, some of them have that, not all. One thing that I don't like, or 2 things I don't like. One is related to Crisis Core. Remember I was saying how at the end of a failed battle, you could respec your character's armor, materia, weapons.
Yeah.
And then go again. You can't do that here. It takes you either back to the very start of the battle before it events, which means you lose all that phase progress, so you don't get to restart halfway through, or you just go in with the same loadout again. So I still want that menu to come up every time and ask me if I want to change my loadout and to restart from the point that I was, my last available point. I don't know why that's only in Crisis Core and not in any other game. I don't know how that's the only game in the whole world that has that, but that's seemingly what they decided to do. Secondly, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this, there are certain attacks that the bosses will do. Maybe not always bosses. I think some rank and file can do this, but mostly bosses and sub-bosses, where essentially it's a DPS check. They will charge up a big move, and it will come up above the head. It'll always tell you, it'll be like they're summoning something, or they're going to do this particular move, and they'll stand there for about 15, 20 seconds, depending on the charge. And if you don't stagger them, or defeat them, or in other ways interrupt them, they'll wipe your party. It's fucking Destiny when you're trying to take down that Argos cunt, and you ain't got enough damage to it. I don't like that. It's cheap. It annoys me. Unless you've saved up your limit breaks, which is another thing that you can build up during your attacks, or have the right ability or I don't know. Sometimes you're just there and you're like, well, can he do anything about this? I can't even attack it enough to do enough damage to stop it or kill it. So I'm just going to have to take the wipe here. And the only counteracting of that is to put like re-raise accessories on your party so that they don't die. They get re-raised and when they die once, then it breaks. But I'm not a fan of that, if I'm honest. It does feel like a cheap rat tactic just to employ. And the thing that annoys me most is you're not aware of this until the first time you go through and fail.
Right, okay.
Like, 'cause you're not tipped off that they're going to do this move, and then suddenly you see him, you go, what's that? What's he doing that? Hell on earth? What's that mean? And you sort of ignore it, go about your business, then suddenly it does this cutscene and kills everyone. You're like, well, now I've got to do next time and make sure I fucking get on top of that. Annoying.
Yeah, I don't like... I don't generally like those things in games because it puts the pressure on, and I get why it's there because it raises the stakes.
Yeah.
It makes you think about it a bit more. But yeah, like I always think like I like to do these things in my own time. So if it takes me 5 phases instead of 3, like what harm is that? Like I'm being less risky, and it'll take longer, and that's my play style. It's like, no, you got to do it in these 3 phases or you get fucking wiped. It's like, well, why?
And of course they do it right when they're on the brink of death, these fucking enemies.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's even more annoying in a way because they had 1 pixel left and he somehow got off his fucking cutscene.
As I say, I do get it. I don't, for obvious reason, enjoy it because most of these things are hard enough. Like, why are we adding that in as well? Like, I don't want to use Destiny's example, but that is usually hard enough. Like, and then there's that kind of like ultimate failure point, and it's like, well, fuck you. So yeah, I don't like it.
Not a fan of it, but it's there. Having known it was there and then figuring out. Some of them you don't think you can interrupt. Like you have to just kill them in that time, especially if it's the end of their life. But there are some that you have to be a bit strategic about when you use your limit break. And in fact, just save them for when they do that. And then you don't have any problems. Not in 2 minds. I still rather they didn't have them in there. But there is a way around it if you logically just don't just spam all your ultimates early on in the fight. Because there's really no need to. And you just got a bit more strategic. But like I said, you don't be knowing that until you face it the first time and get done over. And you're like, well, I've just... Essentially, it sets you up just to fail the fight first time. I don't like that. I'm like, you don't be doing that.
There should be a way of like teaching you that this will crop up and to notice when it's going to...
Maybe there is. I mean, there's so much fucking... So many different things going on in this game that it could well have been a pop-up that I didn't see and or saw and didn't retain for other enemies, but... There you go, you live and you learn. They've all the main shit's been defeated. I've checked off most of the turrets, so they've all been put down in some way, and I've had my beating up on them. That's all I care about.
Job done. Right, which pillar next? Shall we do the world?
Let's do the world.
The open world, in brackets.
Yeah, because it actually plays out like a linear game to start with. Like, you essentially start in one region, which is like the map basically for that area. Then you go to another region and the story takes you on a journey around all the different regions that the game has to offer, and you can kind of backtrack to a certain degree but not really at some points. Like sometimes you are locked out of some earlier areas, and then it becomes fully explorable eventually. Like there's because I was a bit confused because in the run up to this I was like, it's a fully seamless open world that you can explore, and I was like, well, it ain't, because I can't do that. But it does eventually crack it open. And I'm in 2 minds about how they've done this, because each region literally has these, the Ubisoft towers that everyone hates.
Yeah.
There's literally a tower, there's several towers, in fact, in each region that you go up and plug a fucking gadget into, and it unlocks new activities for you to do and shows them on the map, which just as a concept is so overly done. It's about 15 years old. The actual side stuff, which we'll get into later, isn't actually all that bad. The amount of activities and things are quite unique, but I just don't like the idea of having to go up a tower and doing it. Like, can't you thought of a more creative way to do this? Or better yet, just let it pop up if I go near enough to it. Let me explore. Encourage me to explore, in fact. Don't make me go to a tower and unlock it all. Each region also has a chocobo in it. Now, there's more than one chocobo during the game, but they'll have a unique ability, and that's usually linked to how you can traverse the world. So, for example, in Junon, which I think is the second region, they can climb up walls. So there are certain parts of that map that are built where you can only use a chocobo to climb up the wall and get to it, and you unlock each chocobo by doing a certain activity when you get there. So that's something to keep in mind, that each map or region has its own sort of unique traversal spin. Trouble is, I think that for the most part, the regions are really good. They all look very unique. There's a beach, there's a jungle, desert, you know, all the stuff, the biomes that you'll see. Nice variety. Grasslands is the first one, so it's a nice flat grassy region. But because of this necessity that they've sort of put on their own shoulders to say, right, we've got to have a unique ability for these chocobos to make these regions worthwhile. There were a couple that were just a pain in the arse to traverse, like seriously annoying, because for some reason they decided that was going to be the unique element to that chocobo. So actually on one of them, I tolerated it. It was a pain to get around. I was like, this is a bit different, and you know, it's a bit more dense, it's got a bit more verticality. I'm like, I'm okay with this. Getting from A to B to C is a pain because you have to kind of thread your way through these certain routes that they've predetermined. And I was like, I'm okay with that to a certain extent, but it was annoying me. The very next one was just a fucking pig to get through. And I ended up fast travelling on that one, which I don't like to do, as you know. But it was so... It's one of those ones where if you went to a certain area of the map and then need to go back to, say, the beginning or where the sort of story mission is, you'd have to run around and go up about a 15-minute journey to get there because there's no other way of doing it. And in fact, I went to a certain part of the map and was like, okay, I'm going to unlock these sort of side bits, do a bit of side stuff, and then I'll crack on with the main mission. Went to go and do the main mission. I was like, I actually can't get down to the fucking... What's the name? I can't get to where I need to go. So I had to fast travel. It forced me into it. I was going to get that door.
So once that had been broke...
Yep. You were about to ask something.
I was going to say, did that break? Yeah, I was going to say, did that break the fast travel duck? So you're like, well, I've got to do it here. So it's been done once, and then that's now enabled. Yeah, kind of. I tried not to until I got to until I was like going back through and like clearing up side stuff post game. That's a problem in itself. I'll come back to that. Clean up, fucker. But yeah, it did annoy me having to do that because there was no physical way for me to even avoid it, and it's because I decided to tackle the side stuff before the main story. Historically, if you did that on the map, sometimes it'd be like, right, we're taking you to another region now. I was like, well, hang on a minute, I haven't done any of the side stuff. I haven't done any of my region intel, as they call it. So yeah, that did bug me that one zone. But then the one after that was like the best to travel around, and it was really smooth and like a good idea. And part of me just thinks I would wish they had one chocobo that you earned the abilities for, but could utilise, rather than having it sort of specific to each region, like the climb up the wall. Why not have a climb up a wall in a later region as well? So you're kind of still using that skill. Everything felt so a bit contrived that each region only used its, the certain ability to get around. So that was an irritant in the end. It was such a pig to navigate, but that was just one region out of, I don't know, half a dozen. I can't remember exactly how many unique ones there are in the end. So, not too terrible. It wasn't a consistent thing, but got up my nose and just made that the whole clearing down of that area just a pain in the arse. Interesting. I agree with you, because when you're talking to me about that, I think for some reason the game that springs to mind is ukulele. I don't know why. It's just, but there are certain things that you can't do earlier on in earlier levels, and then as you unlock abilities later on, you can come back and do those things, and you go, oh, I remember what this could be for. And I just find it weird, like in those sort of games, even later abilities you can use in earlier levels, and I think they're missing, by the sounds of it, a bit of a trick. By not expanding that across.
It would have been nice to have that kind of. That's what is typical for a Metroidvania. Like, you can't access this cave yet, but who knows in the future, once you unlock the ability, you can come back. And it gives you a reason to go back and do all that, rather than just arbitrarily shitting out a load of side content and saying, oh, there's now more stuff to do in the grasslands. And you're like, well, I'm halfway across the fucking planet. Like, what? Really? What are we doing here? Like, it would be nice to have some more stuff locked behind, you know, like progressing further. And you'd be like, oh, maybe I will just go back and work through it all. But alas, that wasn't the case for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
But generally speaking, you liked it, other than this pig of a traversal piece across the world.
Yeah, I think on balance, yeah. I said the towers could be handled a little bit more eloquently and come up with a new idea. But yeah, it is what it is, and each region has a number of activities that you can do to unlock the sort of intel of that world. You do specific activities, and you know, I'll get onto those during the side to it. But yeah, it was generally good, other than that one or two areas that got up my nose a little bit. But I was impressed at how these places looked, and the design of them mostly, and sort of obviously the characters that you meet during those areas. It felt natural, and it was really quite awe-inspiring to sort of go through some of the interlinked regions, like being able to just travel through them. Like, it is fucking huge, this map, when you take it into account. Like, and like I said, once it all opens up, it's like, wow, you can actually just travel this whole planet almost and roar around. So definitely a thumbs up mostly in that area.
Nice. So the next pillar then, should we move on to side quests?
Yes, mini games and odd jobs and additional toot. So there are, if I said 100, close to 100, I'd say, different mini games that you can pick up during this game. It really is absurd, the amount of things that they've got there, and that can range from chocobo racing to a card game. There's a Gwent style card game in Final Fantasy Rebirth called Queen's Blood, which has a quest line and a story attached to it, which is really cool. Chocobo Racing does as well. Not all the mini games do. Some are just like, there's one that's like a rip off of Rocket League, where you have to knock a load of balls into a net with Red 13. There's like a shooting gallery. There's a Fall Guys style mini game where you control a frog, and there's like a pillar spinning around. You have to jump over the pillar, and it gets faster and faster, and the platforms start to move. Like, there's an insane range of just garbage to get on with and try and fuck about with, which is highly interesting. Some of it's good, some of it's great, some of it's not so good, some of it's not so great. It does run that complete gambit, but it's astounding how much of the mini games are there. Then you've got, like, once you unlock the region tower, it'll give you certain activities to go off and do. Some of them are a bit run-of-the-mill, like kill this new enemy type, this rare enemy type that we've dropped. And there's a specific way to kill it. So you want to kill it in under 2 minutes or something. You also want to stagger it. You also want to pressure it, like certain like checkbox items. And as long as you kill it, it doesn't matter. But these like additional little extra bits that you can get. So they're a bit run-of-the-mill. Then you've got the odd jobs, which are basically the side quests. These are interesting because every time you activate one of them, the little side story, one of your party members will have shown interest in it. Usually there's a good reason why, because it might be in the world that they originate from, or it might be related to a task that they used to do before they joined up with your party. But they will be there standing in the cutscene talking and interacting with the other character, and you're kind of doing the job for them. And what I like about that is it ties into like your party relationships. Like, it's got this sort of meta, not life sim, but relationship sim type thing, where there are certain points that you can talk to your party and you can interact with them, and depending on what you say, it'll boost or neutralize your relationship with them. And then these side quests boost your relationship with them. So you boost it, that gives you a nice little experience boost, and gives you on their little meat, they've got a little smiley face above their heads showing their relationship with you. It'll go green because they're happy with you, or it'll start to shine. Just a nice little, it's a reason to do it outside the usual XP and item get. Like you know you're going to strengthen your bond with this particular individual. So I like those. And then there's the proto relic finding, which is usually on each of the regions. This is usually where there's a unique mini game or unique task for you to interact with throughout the whole region. So one of them's it's called, what's it called? Is it one called Gears and Gambits, which I won't describe because it's too difficult to describe. There's like a MOBA style mini game that's attached to the proto relics, and each of these have their own little mini storyline attached to them, which is good. And again, you do it for the experience, but you also get to get a better understanding of the world. There's tons more as well. Like there's just it really is a content-rich game, which comes at a cost because 101 hours sitting there lurking, and there's still VR missions for me to do if I really wanted. But I've done all the tracked stuff in the real world, and I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, if you want to do everything, you're going to be there a while, which is a good thing. But can it bring down the pacing of the game? Yes. They do a bit of a poor job at handling sort of like the no point of return. Like often with these games, it'll be like, right, you're going to this section, clear up stuff that you want to do, or forever hold your peace type thing. It does warn you. It just says you won't return after this point, and you're like, okay, what do I do here? But at that point, it done what Final Fantasy 16 did, sort of on the brink of getting to this climax, and it goes, well, here's another dozen side quests across the entire world to go and do. You're like, what? Logically, this doesn't make sense for the party to go and tackle that shit, because we're on the case now. We're starting to get somewhere. And also, as a player, you're like, oh, fuck that. I want to just see this through.
Yeah.
And you can go back. So you can go back and redo this stuff, which I did do. My problem is that it's clumsily handled. You just basically chapter select. Once you finish the game, it goes, right, you can now select a chapter to go back to. You retain all your gear, all your experience. You can now unlock, if you want to, and use hard mode, which isn't unlocked by default. And you just go back into the game. It's as though you're in that time, that place, and it doesn't tie together. You're just sort of playing the game at that point. It feels a bit empty. And that's where I started fast traveling. I was like, fuck this. I'm just going to go around and clear up all the shit. Still took me a good 12 hours. So imagine traveling, the amount of added that would have done. But I was like, that's a clumsy way of handling it. Like a lot of games, will have the storyline be able to cater for you finishing that stuff after the main game. Not the case here, which is fine. That doesn't always have to happen. Final Fantasy 15 has that example. Final Fantasy 15 had the best solution, though. There's this little fella you can visit. I think his name's Umbra, like a little dog type thing. And you sit down with him and you reminisce about a previous chapter. You go back in with all your gear and stuff, and it's just an excuse for you to go back to the open world and clear stuff up. But there's a reason for it. It's contextualized. Here, no, you just sort of go back in and just play the game for playing the game. So I didn't like that part of it. The clear up operation and the up their own arsed attitude of just going, right, here's another 12 hours of content as you get to the climax of this thing. It's like, oh, come on. What are we doing? What part in their right mind would go and...
You've already got 85 hours out of me. What more do you want?
I just think there's a better way of structuring these things so they don't just chuck crap. Because Final Fantasy 16 did the exact same thing. Shit a load of quests out right before you get to the end. And you're like, oh, what are we doing here? And in that game, I bit the bullet and did all the side stuff first. And that game's just as clumsy. You finish the game, it just resets you back to that before the final mission. Then you just go back in. It's like, wow. Annoying. But that's a Ronnieism, I think. I'm not sure many people are going to be too bothered about that, are they?
I think it's nice. It doesn't bother me, but it's nice when I do appreciate when they make an effort to make it make sense. Like, because in some games it can easily not. Like, there's a lot of games where you can do the main stuff, using Grand Theft Auto as an example. Like, largely the people that you're going to do side quests for have still got the same problems outside of the main quest. Like, so I think there's a lot of ways it can be catered for, but some games, as you say, they're linear. Like, the world blows up or something after you finish it. Like, there's no option.
Nah.
Like, do you know what I mean? It's so, and then they chuck you back into it afterwards, and you go, "Well, this is gone now."
Yeah.
In the timeline of my head, this like,
That's exactly
how are we getting around it?
I was like, it's fine. I enjoyed playing it, but I didn't have any emotional. It was all gone because I'd finished it and it wasn't contextualized. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 really is the gold standard for that. Like those that know, but that really does cater for you doing things at any time. It's really, I don't know why they did it because literally no one would have cared, but they did, and that's once that happened, I was like, well, it can be done. Even with some major changes. Horizon Forbidden West is another one that was really good at doing things like that and even referencing quests that you had or hadn't done. So it can be done, but this is a different game, I guess, and they're not all going to cater for the Ronnieisms going on. So a bit of a mixed bag of that. I mean, I don't know what your view is on like content-rich games, which is the positive way to spin it. The way we normally describe it is fucking bloatville. Like it's there as optional stuff. So do it at your peril. But also, there's a part of a game is psychic. It's like, no, I want to do everything, but then you're setting yourself up for 100 hours, and I don't know what the answer is here.
Yeah, there's a definite balance to be had there because when I think about games where I've done all the side stuff, like Spider-Man, I did all the and I always do all the side stuff because it's okay. It's not overly difficult to do some dog's body work, and they make it somewhat interesting. And you get a reward for it. So in Spider-Man, you get a new suit for doing stuff. So I'm like, right, there's a goal for doing this. So I think there's a goal, but like, I think back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla and the amount of toot that was out there for that. Like, there's a lot of pointless. I felt like there was the quests weren't deep enough and the rewards weren't good enough, and I made cuts there as to what I think was and wasn't worth doing. And
so
I think as long as you get comfortable.
So when you make a cut like that, you say, I'm not doing that fucking part of it because I don't want to, or I can't be asked, or the reward's not there, I'm not that invested. Does that in your head log sort of a negative mark against it because you've had to make the cut, or do you just say, oh no, it's optional, as with most of this stuff it is, you don't need to do it to get through the main game, and therefore I'm not that bothered about it? Or do you think, well, it's a bit of a failing because they're supposed to pull me into all of this and they've overloaded it and now I've walked away from it?
I don't see it as a failing. I think, like, when I think about Valhalla, I see that as bloatville because the whole thing became bloatville.
Right, yeah.
In a lot of ways, right? I think that it was unnecessarily... I think it becomes a bit self-indulgent to make games...
It's
like
that
long.
their own asses.
Keep
in mind, especially with on Rebirth, the original game is about 30 hours. The whole game. They've done a part 1, which was 30 hours on its own, for a 5-hour stint in the game. They've then cut this 80-hour, well, 100-hour if you want to do everything, middle part of the game. I mean, we're already on like treble what the original game was in terms of length, and we're not even through the third part yet. So God knows what it's going to be when it's all said and done. Like, that is overindulgence.
I want to play it and I want to enjoy it, but you sort of get to a point with any game really where you're like, I'm done with this. I've enjoyed my time, but you're taking the piss. Like, and I think we said that like I was probably 20, 30 hours, maybe even more too much on Valhalla. And some of the other games I've played as well, you go, right, like stop being greedy with my time. And it's a tricky balance, right? Because on the other hand, you're getting extra content like that you don't have to play. But I just prefer to, I guess in my view, right, and I suspect you're the same with side quests, it's like, well, surely you've put it in there, so you want me to play it.
Yep. Like, and in some games, like RPGs like this, where you're leveling up. Yeah. Like, now I can't speak to this because I didn't experience it this way, but I do wonder if you mainlined it, whether you'd be left a bit underpowered at certain points, have to struggle through some of those battles. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, because I know people have mainlined it and got through it. But even when I was so I was clearing down each region as I went, clear down every region that I could. And then, as I said, once I got to the last third, I was like, right, let's get this over with. This is now becoming urgent in my head. I want this done. Not for my own time, but for the character perspective. That doesn't make sense for me to go on another fucking world tour. let's crack on with this. We're close. I was only like 2 or 3 levels above the recommended mainline quest level. And I was thinking, what if someone hadn't done the previous 30 activities that I've done? Like, would they still be in range? And I don't know the answer to that. I suspect you can brute force your way through, because I know people do that all the time. But I guess where I would be concerned about games that do this level of content is when you start to sort of strong arm the player into doing it by making them underpowered and not being able to get through it. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I had this exact problem. I couldn't just stick to the main path. It wanted me to do side crap to get into the zones and take on the high level enemies. And I was like, and guess what they had? Fucking XP boosters lurking in the store to help you out. And I was like, well, I know where this is going. This doesn't have any of that, fortunately. But
yeah,
that's when it starts to get... I think the game is you have to mainline or golden path any game without doing any side content and still be at the appropriate level to do it, without it being some fucking master stroke that you've got to do in combat. Like, you should better just do it rather than having to really... No, you don't mind things being difficult, but when it becomes cheap...
Possible, or that it's forcing you to do side quests, you go, well, this ain't side then, is it?
No.
It becomes mainline.
Ain't a fucking odd job, is it? At that stage. It's a fucking the job to get through it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
I know people have mainlined this. It takes them 30 hours, so I do want to put that out there for people that aren't interested in it and can just walk away from the side crap. Like, people have done it in that time. I don't know whether you'll struggle with the leveling, because you won't have as much XP, you won't have as much materia for sure. Items, things like that do become a factor later on, but I won't speak to whether that's actually true or not.
Yeah, fair enough. So, one last pillar.
Yeah, story and or characters. Kind of relates into some of the activities, I guess, and the odd jobs. Like, I think the odd jobs and the side activities do add to the story and definitely the characters, so that's a nice bit of synergy there. Main quest line, I'd say, underwhelming. Okay. Now, I say that with the knowledge, knowing that they're most likely going to do a third... Well, they've said they're going to do a third game. Unless they have some sort of liquidation go on, we're likely to see a third part of this. And that actually, this is the second part of a 3-part story. So I don't know what I was necessarily expecting in terms of resolution. In fact, I knew it wasn't going to get fucking resolved because it's part 2. And I'm kind of okay with that. That's not actually my problem with it. But this part of the game, the main sort of story, is just very light, I think. They do a good job of trying to flesh it out during this process, but for the most part, you're not really doing a lot. You're just traveling these regions, just trying to follow Sephiroth, and that's kind of it. Like, that's kind of the story. And obviously they start to ramp things up and there's things that happen along the way. But if you go from like a bird's eye view and look at actually why things were happening, it's like, well, you're just following this fuck around, essentially, or trying to trying to follow a breadcrumb or whatever. So there's part of me that's like, well, look, it's the middle of the story, so what did you expect? But compared to like Remake, that has some key moments, some real, like, throughout. That's an interesting tale just on its own. There's all sorts going on. This felt like it didn't have as many of those because the climaxes are all going to happen in the third game. The resolution is going to happen in the third game. So that was I think it is somewhat underwhelming. And the other thing that didn't help it is they may well have jumped the shark in terms of their intent to fuck with people and make it ambiguous and, what's really going on. Because you come out at the end of it, I'm not quite sure what's occurred there. I have an idea. But when my first instinct is like, I probably need to go on YouTube and just see what the conversation is. I'm not sure if that's a good place to be. Again, I'll qualify that. This is part 2 of a part 3 story. So I'm kind of inclined to wait and see. Because if part 3 pays all this off, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's kind of one big story. But if they blow it, it's going to make this seem like an absolute farce.
Well,
and again,
yes
from
and
your
no.
perspective, I'd be interested in your perspective, because it's like it's leaning into the fact and sort of begging you, say, right, part 3's coming, but you're going to be left with more questions than answers in some ways.
Yeah, but they're telling me that I can play this game on its own. What I'm
saying. If they say it about part 3, it's a lie. It's a definite lie. I'm not having it.
So, on one hand, I'm being told I could play this game on its own and really enjoy it. Yeah. Whereas
I don't think
if you know there's another coming. I mean, it's with like anything. If you're watching a trilogy of films,
to call this a standalone or a way to play it standalone is just no. You're not gonna want to.
No, it's like watching Lord of the Rings: Two Towers. And you haven't seen what's happened in the Fellowship, and then spinning off the Lord
which I'm fine with. If it's a trilogy, it's a trilogy. Like I didn't expect to get to the end of Two Towers and think this is the end of the series. It's like no, we've got another one coming. What's it? Return to the King? Is that it?
Return of the King. Yeah.
Okay, right. Let's see what that is, and then we'll judge what happened and the events overall because it's designed that way. And I'm actually okay with that as a structure. Yeah. I don't need declosure, but yes,
using that as an example, Two Towers is actually my favourite Lord of the Rings film. It's
a lot of people's favourite.
And it's the middle one, right? So it can be done because there's something obviously key that happens in that film and it builds up to something as part of the story. And I think that's the key part is that I think in good stories, irrespective of where you're at in the whole trilogy or journey, something good happens in each. Yeah. And I think that it has to be judged on its own merit, I think. I can't just go, I see what you're building up to, but I've spent 100 hours chasing Sephiroth or whatever his name is. And like, do you know what I mean? Because on its own, it's unfulfilling. There wasn't, you can be building up to something while something's happening that's good.
Yeah. I mean, there are significant moments in it. I don't want to completely lie. But I would say that a lot of this won't ring true until part 3 to see actually how they play out some of this stuff. That could be a masterstroke because in the context of the whole trilogy, you'd be like, "Wow, that's actually even more powerful." Now I know where this goes and actually what was occurring. But sitting here in 2024, I'm like, well.
So what we're saying is do you give them the benefit of the doubt or not?
Well, I'm happy to because I knew this. I knew this going into this project. It's a free part. They said it, so I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Like, doesn't Lord of the Rings, the first one, like end on a bit of a cliffhanger? They're like, right, we're going to go to this place, and the credits roll, and everyone's like, what? Something like that. I thought I remember that being a thing. I can't remember it rightly, but I know this is a 3-part project, so I'm actually okay with it in the grand scheme of things. But buyer beware, if you want the closure, if you want to understand fully what's happening, you ain't going to get it here. You didn't get it in Remake, really, and they've done it again here, which will leave people questioning what's occurring, what's going to happen. And I must admit, it does create good debate and good discussions. Like you could sit here over a few beers with someone and really talk about what's going on or what's not going on in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and what that means for part 3. I think that is valuable in some way. But if you do it as a standalone, get out. Don't. You got to commit now. If you're going to do this, you got to commit to the third part, which is kind of a plus and a minus. And I'm okay with games taking a different approach and doing that. Not everything's got to be a one and done. You know, if you want to do a multi-part story, fine. Just you better make sure at the end of that multi-part story it was worth it. And I think some people will be a bit underwhelmed with this, and I think the main quest is a little bit underwhelming. But you know, is the middle part, and I guess we'll see in a few years what happens. On the good side of things, the characters and the interactions with your parties and their personalities are top draw throughout. So I said the side quests feed into sort of relationship building, which is good. I said there's certain moments where you can talk to your party and have a dialogue choice, and that'll either add or... I don't think you can detract. I think once the relationship's at a certain stage, you won't ever go down, but you might hit a neutral one where it doesn't go up. So I think there's 3 options. One that's neutral, one that's +1, one that's +3, let's say, on this little scale. And obviously you want to hit the +2 or 3 one, but you don't always get that. And using the synergy abilities in combat also enhances the relationship as well. So it's worth unlocking those and doing them if you want to go down that part. My only criticism with the party and the smaller interactions outside of the main story is I wish there were more checkpoints in the game where, depending on the state of your relationship with everyone, you'd maybe get a different story or cutscene with one of your party members, because this happens once in the game where, depending on the status of your relationship, that the person who's basically highest will come with you on a certain segment of the game, like a cutscene and whatnot. I wish there was like 2 or 3 more of those. So the early game, maybe I've powered up to Barret and we go off and have this like unique like little moment together because he's like my closest ally at that point. Maybe as the game goes on, to get close to Tifa or Aerith, and it change. Like you could have like these nice little checkpoints throughout. I think that's something they should look at expanding, having those moments with people throughout the game rather than just being sort of like a one-off. It's a good idea to have that because it means my playthrough is most likely going to be unique compared to your playthrough. And if you offer 2 or 3 of those checkpoints, it's going to be even more unique rather than just being sort of 1 of 6 of what it might be. So I like they included that, but I would like to see it more little like checkpoints and unique parts of it. But yeah, the triumph of this game really is on the story front is the characters, the amount of texture and backstory you learn about each of your party members is really in depth, and the world itself. Like those side quests, those odd jobs, those activities do give you a really fleshed out view of what's going on in this planet. But like I said, it is a bit of a mixed bag. I think the main quest line struggles a little bit, and the ambiguity they may or may not have left people with, the theories that they're able to come up with is exciting. But if you walk away now at part 2 and don't finish the story, as Cody might say, then you might be left struggling to understand or care. But you've got to know going in, this is a 3-parter, so don't listen to their lies about standalone entries because it ain't.
And that's Jenga.
That's Jenga.
So did you want to touch on some of the bits that you mentioned at the top around like gameplay, graphics, and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, because I think the presentation and performance is another mixed bag. Now the negative of this game is the image quality is very soft, and I played it on performance mode, which means higher frames, lower resolution. But it is a very soft looking game. Like it's not very sharp, and that's kind of the trade-off you have to take. Yeah. Runs really well in performance mode though, so it's not like Final Fantasy 16, which was plagued in its performance mode and was stuttering when you were exploring and whatnot. This is pretty much smooth throughout. There's maybe a few drops here and there, but I ain't monitoring it 24/7. It played nicely. But the real gold standard they've shown here is I did not have a single crash. 101 hours, expansive RPG, not a single crash, not a single soft lock, not a single real bug to note of. No having to restart, no messing around, no squabbling, having to restart certain things. None of that really. It was all just there, working as it should do. And in today's day and age, there's games that are a quarter of this length that you can't walk 10 metres without running into some sort of bug that causes a problem. So that really is. The only thing I had is one icon didn't show up for Queen's Blood. One. I think that's because I didn't go to the area to explore. I think you have to be in the room for it to show up. But other than that, flawless. Not a single sausage of a problem, which I couldn't believe. When I got to the end of it, I was like, I actually haven't had any issues here. Like, it's crazy. That is some polish. That is unheard of. Yeah. Keep in mind, this is a 101-hour game that I've played it. The remake came out 4 years ago. So they've done this game and polished it in 4 years. This expansive world. That is... I don't know what they've done, because these games are taking 5 years plus for 20-hour experiences, and they've done this in 4 years, and I'm like, holy shit.
Work their arse off.
My worry was that it'll be fucking rough as houses. It'll struggle. There'll be bugs, but no. Whoever's cleaning that code has done a great job there. So soft image, but really zero bugs to write home about, which I can't remember the last time I said that about any video game.
Unheard of, really. But there's very few games that I play that are silky smooth. Even to this day, Rocket League, when I play it, sometimes randomly crashes at the end of a game for no apparent reason. So it's still prevalent in most games. So fair play to them, as you say, for polishing out such a high standard.
Yeah, and then really this goes without saying for people that know Final Fantasy, but if you're not aware, Final Fantasy probably has some of the best soundtracks in gaming, and Final Fantasy VII, the original, had a great soundtrack, and now It's expanded with a full orchestra, like not restricted on what they can put in there. It really is sublime. The battle music, the music for the cutscenes, each character's kind of personal theme, like it's superb. Like this, it's almost not worth mentioning, but you have to. Final Fantasy 16 was the same. Final Fantasy 15 was the same. Remake was the same. They've really just got that nailed down. So if you like your soundtracks, this is absolutely one of them. And
easy to take it for granted.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I think a lot of games don't have bad soundtrack. I don't listen to it and go, "Oh, that's bad, isn't it?" But there are a lot that you kind of don't always feel great, and this is definitely one of the great ones.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to mention that we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. I think it's a big game. I've had to scrape over bits, skip over bits, and you could go another hour probably if I cared enough. But it's not. At some point, you have to pull the plug on.
You talk about overindulgence.
Yeah, yeah. It's not. That is true. But no, I don't think so. Unless you've got any outstanding questions about the game itself, anything that you think, oh, he's not made sense there, or anything you wanted to drill down into.
I don't think there's anything particular. I think we just touched on it at the beginning that I'm just lost with the whole series. So is the plan for them to do a third in this and then revisit another one of them and break it down? Or
there's rumours that the third entries, essentially they've got two teams. One that's doing the main lines, like the newer ones. So 16 was the latest one, and then they'll be doing 17. They've got the Rebirth project going on by another team. There may be another team lurking. I don't know. It's all rumour and innuendo at this point. But I don't know. Once they finish this one, there's rumours they might do Final Fantasy IX. I think that's in the NVIDIA GeForce leak listed somewhere. So that typically has been pretty accurate. But who knows is the question. I mean, they've got this one's the priority to finish off. And then I guess depending on the success or the appetite, they may choose another. But I mean, this has taken a 30-hour turn-based game and now it's 100+ hour two-parter, full action combat, full cutscenes, voice, the lot. Like, it's not even the same game at this point, even without sort of the narrative changes they might have tweaked along the way. It's not really the same game. It's a retelling potentially of what's going on in a modern space. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what they'll do, to be honest. I guess it's wait and see. But they ought to finish this first, get this third one done. And have a little rest, I think. If you're chucking these out every 4 years, it's going to be a difficult cadence to keep up with.
Yeah, indeed. Right then. So I think we will move towards a grading.
Yep.
Into this segment of the podcast. I mean, it goes in, right? I mean, we go in. I think we discussed bins and various other different things, but I think ultimately this is...
Yeah, no botchling bin 'cause it's been finished, so it can't go in there, and it won't go in the self-storage outside. So it's going in the gallery.
Just a question of where. So where does this game sit?
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. In this vibrant and vast world, in this standalone entry into the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, earns itself a silver. Some ups, some downs, but ultimately very positive on it. And looking forward to part 3. Has the potential to cap off this saga in a great way. And whether they stick the landing or not will be up for debate, but I don't know when we'll see it. I mean, they've done this one in 4 years. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting for the world, technology and making it open world. Like, I don't know. Maybe it will be another 4 years or maybe 5. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it not so far in the distant future. I think they want to get this out. Hopefully before the PS6 would be ideal, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be a PS6 launch title, really kick that generation off. If we get a PlayStation 6, may not get it. But yeah, silver for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Was you expecting higher, lower, or about where you thought it might be?
I thought you were going to go gold. I assume in your mind, the thing that drags it down, if you like, if you want to put it in those terms, not that silver's bad, but I assume it's more that story not hitting the highs that you would have liked.
it's the story and the
That
quest,
level.
the quest pacing of just chucking Toot out and I didn't like those 2 bits, and that one level really fucked me off. Like royally got on my fucking wick when I found out I had to fast travel. I was like, well, that's the end of that then. Kind of glad, because if I had tried to just travel around that world without it, I'd have been in there dozens of hours, I think, trying to navigate that fucking labyrinth. So it definitely made things easy. But yeah, it's just a few bits and pieces that kind of let it down. But overall, a great experience. And I'm shocked it got a 93 on OpenCritic. I must say that feels exceptionally high. But anyone saying that nostalgia's not playing a factor is kidding themselves.
It's a liar.
Because you see it in the review saying, oh, they've really brought these characters to life. I'm like, whoa, there we go. That's what's really got you, isn't it? You can't believe that Barret's a fully fleshed out character now. And the stuff you had in your head, it's almost like as time's gone on, people assume that's how deep these characters were. You go back, they're all right, but they're not at this level.
Not this level.
They're not being brought to life like this. There's not this level of emotional attachment, I would say, going on to this. And the whole presentation folds into that. Like, absolutely, just it's almost like what people probably dreamt up that it could be. So I think that's given it an extra 5. I think really it sits as a high 80s without that nostalgia factor. But I'm not going to criticise, because you can't just cut that out, can you, of your psyche? It is what it is, isn't it, at that stage?
I suppose it does play into it. Like if there's particular games that we used to like that are then expanded upon and redone, it does make you go, cool.
Yeah.
This is so much better because it's improved on what I remember. So yeah. I suppose
it's a tricky one. But anyone claiming that's not part of the success of this critically is nonsense. But yeah, I still think it's pretty good. Silver. And that's that. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in the books. Don't know when we'll be back, but we will be with some more game impressions to lay down. I mean, this came out in February, this game. Like, this is published in a week after we recorded it because of the bank holiday. But I've literally been playing it since it came out in February. Like, it is that long. Like, it spent that much time. Now, we discussed Helldivers 2 a few weeks ago. That was a distraction. So I wasn't 100% committed to the cause. But, like, almost 3 months.
Yeah, but you're usually running a couple of different games concurrently. Like, that's not unusual. Helldivers was a particularly big distraction, but you're not... There's normally something else rattling around, isn't there?
No, I normally stick to one.
Like,
there's nothing else on the horizon that I'll jump into potentially. Like, if I'm playing Persona, once you've missed a few of those expansions, that's the end of it. I'll let others go down that rabbit hole and they can tell me. You can access all the content, so not for me, Destiny. Sorry. And people getting ready for that, but no. I normally just play one game at a time. I might have a bit of like a management sim on the go potentially, but not another story game. Like, you wouldn't catch me playing Cyberpunk and then this at the same time. There's just a recipe for disaster. So there is a bit of wiggle room there, but we'll see. Anyway, let's get out of here. Nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.